Jeffrey Charles Vasile, Sicilian, bon vivant, cartoonist.
Somebody's been reading my business card.
That's just how I think of it.
Sure.
So part of like what I want to do in these, and I'm not sure how. Basically, the first 20, 25 people that I have lined up are all people I've known for 10 to 20 years now, which again makes me both happy and horrified of how elderly I am.
So much happiness at our age comes with horrification as well.
But I want to like do the whole like, how do we know each other?
Okay.
Yeah, and so to my recollection, and my recollection isn't great because I remember telling Brandon, who's like one of my best friends, I'm like, I remember meeting you in 1994. You were doing an impression of Tom Kenny on The Edge, doing an impression of, what was that Tom Hanks movie at the time where he was Forrest Gump? Okay,
yeah,
and I've never seen it, but I was just like, you were doing an impression of Tom Kenny doing an impression of Forrest Gump in Pulp Fiction, and he was just like, I only know who Tom Kenny is in the last couple of years because my kids have watched SpongeBob SquarePants, and I didn't see Pulp Fiction until years later. So all of that is impossible. So it's great to know that my recollection is so spot on. The first time I remember meeting you was at Comic Relief. I walked in with Matt at closing time. And we were talking to Rory. And I remember, like, you were counting out the drawer. That's all I remember. And then, like, weeks later, like, I ran into you later. I think I maybe hung out with you and Matt a couple of times. And then, like, maybe a few weeks, couple of months later, like, we had lunch at Bongo Burger. What's your recollection? Also, there were gallons of booze.
Could you call me a bon vivant again?
Yes. Jeff Vasile. Jeffrey Charles Vasile. Jeffrey Charles Vasile. Bon vivant.
And it's Sicilian.
How does it fit?
I have self-referred any number of times. I think I might even say that in my Instagram bio right now.
Bon vivant.
Bon vivant, yeah. I've used that and gadfly interchangeably over the years.
They're kind of two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, you're doing your best on either side, the positive or the negative, to not be a shit hook, but engage in your practice. So you're a bon vivant. You're not a fucking dick. You're not a douchebag. You're a bon vivant. Mm-hmm. You're living life well.
Yeah.
If you're a gadfly, oh, you scamp. But
I may have aged out of scamp, but
a gadfly.
A gadfly is just a full-grown scamp.
Exactly.
A scamp is a larval gadfly.
Exactly. That is the metamorphosis.
Yeah.
That is the progression.
Yeah, you go into your velvet chrysalis and you emerge as
with your custom, your monogrammed
smoking jacket.
Oh, I was thinking flats.
Oh, I was thinking full on
smoking jacket.
Yeah.
So, what is your recollection of like when we met?
The earliest recollection I have is when we were at Matt's, one of Matt's little soirees, and I made the now infamous comment to you about your two-tone records tattoo, which I will not repeat here.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You have no idea what I'm talking about?
No.
That's good. You know what? I'm glad.
Okay.
But that's the earliest memory I have of hanging out with you. But I know early on, working in Comic Relief, for those listening who may not know, Comic Relief was a decades-old comic book store in Berkeley run by the venerable comics magnate Rory Root. And
is the rumor true that do you believe the rumor is true that the comics guy on The Simpsons is him?
I don't believe the rumor's true because there the comics guy on The Simpsons is a pretty generic version of the comic book store owner. Like
that is true.
I've met a lot of comic book store owners that are exactly like that guy. Rory certainly had things in common with him. There are a number of other living comic store owners that I won't mention by name that obviously have things in common with him. But I think that if somebody with the like satirical acuity of Matt Groening had decided to base a character on Rory, it would have been much more specifically Rory,
right,
and not just a broad impression of a comic store owner.
How about the Ed Brubaker one? This is going back to when he was an indie guy.
Oh, the shit from Low Life?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know, because I'd heard a couple things. Apparently, he worked at Half Price Books too.
Okay.
And I think since there was a much more literary bent to the relationship between those two characters, like they weren't really talking about comics; they were talking about pretty specifically beat authors.
Okay.
And or proto beat authors, as it were. But I just there was never the material that they were discussing never made me think that it might be a comic store owner. Okay. But I know apparently. Yeah, I've heard some stories about what Brubaker did while he worked there. Which, whatever, everybody that worked there was super bitter towards Rory. Like, yeah. Rory, I want to go on record as saying that was a great store and really helped build community amongst Bay Area cartoonists.
It was invaluable.
At a time when there were more than two of us.
Yeah.
But
without Rory, I would not know... kind of maybe half the people that I know now.
Yeah, same here. And that's when you...
real estuary.
Yeah, when you say that you met me there and I was counting out the drawer, like, that's how I met a lot of cartoons. That's how I met Andy Hartzell. That's how I met Adrian Tomine, Dan Clowes, and Richard Sala.
Okay.
That's how I met Joey Sayers, Eric Jones, and Landry Walker. I met through Comic Relief as well.
So yeah, so you recall knowing me through that Comic Relief connection, regardless of it was counting out a drawer or like a comic salon or one of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think mine's correct.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And where are you from?
New Jersey. A little town called Fairlawn.
Okay.
Which, I guess when I talk to people from that area and I tell them I'm from Fairlawn, they act like it's kind of a highfalutin town. Like it's a sort of high-income town full of big houses and high rollers. But there was a dumpier kind of working class side of it where I was from. Was it
like so literally where I grew up in the South, it was across the tracks?
Yeah. The tracks were not there. There were nice houses on either side of the tracks. Okay. I do think that proximity to specifically the train stations on the tracks was a contributing factor to the way that income was distributed. Because I think it was a little bit of a commuter neighborhood for people that worked in the city. But I lived in like a small ranch house, like a single floor, with my mom and dad, and it was pretty small, and you could hear everything that everybody did in all the other rooms.
Yeah, so you could hear everything in the house. And you said it was a single family home?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I only mentioned being able to hear everything in the house because it wasn't like... it's taken me a long time to admit this, but I'm a little precious about the act of making art, and I think I need a good degree of separation from my environment. I need a fair amount of like...
I don't think that's precious. Like, I think that's like, you gotta be that's why I pay good money for a workspace. Like, you're in a separate mind space when you're doing that. You need to be in a separate mind space when you're doing that. Mm-hmm. Versus when I used to work here and I'd have a drafting table set up here. It's a little different doing professional work, like doing artwork, if we can like differentiate between the two. Like, I really do need to have a differentiation between my home life and doing that elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's precious, is my point.
Well, I appreciate that. Because it's something I always felt guilty about. Again, I kind of tie it into the concept of, like, having character, where, like, you should be able to shrug it off if you're, like, mom walks in on you while you're drawing and nags you to mow the lawn later or do your laundry or some bullshit like that. Like, but I kind of grew up, it's not even a matter of my mom walking in or whatever, but just, like, somebody was always watching TV. I could always hear the TV. I could always hear, my mother was always on the phone. I could always hear that. I could hear my parents arguing all the time. And I would put on headphones, but we weren't quite where we are now with the noise canceling in-ear technology. So even if I was, listening to Dokken at full blast while I was drawing Ninja Turtles comics, I could still hear my mom and dad arguing in the next room, or my dad watching the Yankees or whatever. Mm. So I think that there's an extent.
This was when you chose not to join him watching the Yankees, because I know what a big sports fan you are.
Avid sports fan. Yeah. And so that sort of informs the process, I guess. But it also makes, working now where I work in the apartment where I live now, which is also where I make comics, my upstairs neighbor is insane and has a lot of arguments with the mother of his child, and there's always a fracas up there. So it's I guess I've never lived anywhere where I could make comics where I had absolute peace. And I guess I've kind of turned into one of those people that's more comfortable doing it in a coffee shop, depending on what kind of work I have to do. I have a much easier time writing.
So, the other thing about you, in addition to being a cartoonist, you were a musician. Do you still consider yourself to be a musician?
Not really.
When's the last time you played?
I got together with my old bandmates when I was visiting New Jersey recently and played picked up a bass for about 10 minutes.
Okay.
5 of which was spent figuring out how to work a bass again. And
how long had it been?
And I think that was the second time I have played with other people in 12 years.
Oh, wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, it's been a really long time. Yeah, I used to be a lot more serious about being a musician, and I think it's interesting. It's in keeping with the subject of this podcast. I think that it is easier to be in a band while you have a day job that is non-band related than it is to be an artist while you have a day job that's non-art related. And I think it's because there's other people there.
Right.
There's, everybody, like, if your momentum flags, somebody else will pick it up, Theoretically, somebody in your band is always excited about something, and everybody else has to get on board with that thing that person's excited about. And maybe it morphs into something else.
You owe other people, too. Like, you're on the hook to these other people.
Yeah.
You can't just be like, if I don't feel like drawing comics, I just don't fucking draw comics. Mm-hmm. And since there's no money in the way I do it anyway, like, there's no consequence for that.
Fuck, that's it.
No built-in.
That's the whole thing.
Hey, cured you.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you're doing you're doing a group activity, so you're on the hook to these other people.
Yeah, it's like a bowling league or something, and if you don't show up, fucking Walter Sobchak is going to come to your house with a gun and threaten you.
Who the fuck is that?
It's John Goodman's character from The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, I've seen that twice. It's great. I just got better things to do than watch a movie enough times to learn somebody's name.
Sure, I don't mind that you just assailed my value system. That's okay.
Also, I have an impossible time learning names. So.
I have a really difficult time enjoying myself. So if I enjoy myself while doing something, I will attempt to do it again in the hopes to wrench more enjoyment out of it. Many of the things in my life that I enjoy, I have now done that so often that I have just wrung every last drop of it.
So that's cinephilic anhedonia.
Yeah, that's what it is.
We just coined that today.
And I may be there with The Big Lebowski. I might not be able to enjoy The Big Lebowski again, but...
How many times have you seen it?
I mean, it's one of those things that, like... there was a long time where if you were hanging out with a certain group of people of a certain mind, somebody would just put The Big Lebowski on in the background, like putting on a record.
Right.
Or something, but instead there was just ambient Lebowski, and then
there was just like, instead of hearing the Eagles, you're hearing, "I hate the fucking Eagles."
Yeah.
That's my only quote from that movie.
Well,
Because, it's important.
It is. It's if there's any element to that movie's philosophy that stuck with me.
If you can take anything away from The Big Lebowski, in addition to it being a fine movie, to the best of my recollection,
That's a good film.
it's the Eagles suck.
I don't even hate the Eagles like I used to. I hate to say it. Bass. I played bass for, I guess I picked it up my junior or senior year of high school. I was in and out of bands until my late 20s. And, I have always worked service jobs. And there came a point where my last band was frustrating enough that...
And this was Fire X the Forest?
This was Fire X the Forest, okay. Yeah. Who you had very generously come out to see ply our trade a number of times. Even though we were next to unlistably bad.
I don't know that that's true, but... Wasn't my cup of tea, but...
Yeah. At some point, when I was 26 or 27, I kind of sat down and crunched the numbers, and the band fell apart, but I was like, yeah, being in a band is like a real... it's a substantial part of my life, and I love music, and it bums me out, the idea of not playing music. But, I really, between working and, working is taking more out of me every day, and this was 13 years ago, yeah. So, it wasn't, my job was not decimating me physically anywhere near as badly as it does now.
Right. Just as a function of getting older and, having work be, doing service work is physically taxing.
Yes.
And it's harder to... I could not imagine doing the service industry work that I did in my 20s. Now, I would be in the hospital.
Mm-hmm. And also, the changing sort of socioeconomic makeup of San Francisco makes the class divisions that much starker and a little bit more kind of soul-draining.
Yeah.
So
countering that with being in a band where you're just not feeling it like you once did.
It's like I don't have that much to give. I'm giving a lot of it to being in a band. Being in a band in an expensive city like San Francisco is very taxing. Yeah. Coordinating practice schedules with people that have all kinds of different shit going on. If you want a practice space, if you don't have a place to practice in somebody's home or whatever, you have to rent a practice space. A lot of the time, that's cost prohibitive for the kind of people that are in these bands. So you split it with I think at the most we had maybe 12 other people in the practice space, and they were all in each other's bands. So there was 12 people, 4 or 5 bands, and trying to coordinate a schedule between all of those people to use one 10 by 10 room that was stuffed high with musical equipment and rodent droppings, and it was and then that cost money. The space cost money.
The rodent droppings cost money.
The rodent droppings do not grow on trees.
Because they have to pay for their mouse hole in this practice space.
Yeah. Yeah, the mouse hole keep up. But it was, it's a bit of a money pit being in a band, and also, it was not, I hate this term, but there was not a hefty enough return on the investment.
Sure.
So after my last band broke up, I just kind of shelved playing the bass and was like, well, maybe I'll pick it up again if I can find somebody that I really like playing with. But I never did, and I found myself working a lot more on comics after that, and that was when.
So this was not a conscious decision; it was kind of circumstances. At least, if they didn't steer you towards comics, they steered you away from music. It was
a little bit of both.
Okay.
When the band broke up, I did not say I'm never going to be in another band.
Mm-hmm.
But once I started seeing how much more time I got to spend on comics, it was deprioritized for me. Also, this was around the time where a lot of our contemporaries were starting to take their work more seriously. I can't remember what the exact timeline was, but I think the same year my band fell apart was a year I went to the Alternative Press Expo, which is a local small press comics convention in the Bay Area, and a lot of people had new projects out that looked like they were substantial steps forward from their previous projects.
It wasn't the black and white minis. It was like silkscreen cover minis.
It was definitely the era of the silkscreen covers. Yeah,
Right,
it was just as Jesse Reclaw and Andy Hartzell were starting up Global Hobo, and they were telling everybody like these are the aesthetics that we have seen.
This is our baseline
selling. Yeah, well, but it was sales driven too.
Sure.
Like those are two guys that are Jesse particularly was really good at crunching numbers, and he would see like he kept really good records of every convention he went to, and was like, this is what sells, this is what doesn't sell, these are the unifying traits between the things that sell, and like they were like, yeah, we want to carry your book, but we and at this time I had only put out one mini comic. I put out the first issue of my series Track Rabbit, and I did it with a photocopied cover. The cover was kind of an afterthought after I'd finished drawing the book.
Right.
And even at the time, I thought it was shitty. But in retrospect, I'm kind of embarrassed by the way that first printing of that book looked. And Jesse was like, we want to carry this for this mini comics distributor that we're getting off the ground, but we wanted to have a silkscreen cover. We want it to be smaller because those are qualities that we have seen driving up sales.
Yeah.
But anyway,
this is like 2003, 2004.
Yeah, right around that.
Like, ballpark.
So that was around... All these people had projects out that looked like that reflected this sort of aesthetic that Jesse and Andy were demanding of the things that they were carrying. Mm-hmm. And I was just bowled over, I think it's probably when Andy Hartzell had the first Fox Bunny Funny, and that looked... I mean, fucking Andy is just a colossal talent.
I mean, the first draft... versus the, it was a Drummond Quarterly that put that out, ultimately?
No, it was Top Shelf.
Top Shelf.
Next to no editing between his drafts
the mini comic was just, one of the best things that I'd ever seen.
And he's got an incredible design sense, too.
Yes.
So the book looked fantastic.
Yeah.
And he was, the screen printing that he used to do, the stuff looked super labor-intensive.
Yeah. And
it was never off-register. No. It was always, perfect to the millimeter. His stuff looked great. Joey Sayers, I think, had just done my first book of birds, or maybe The Sky. But it was around when she was putting out, a lot of what I think of as, kind of her defining work. The work that sort of, most succinctly distilled her humor and her vision at the time.
Absolutely, yes.
And she was somebody that had asked me for my advice right after I put out Track Rabbit #1. And to see 3 or 4 years later that she was putting out this caliber of work, I was like, I got to get my shit together.
Yeah. And I'm really looking forward to getting her on the mic because I really want to talk to her about her journey through that work. I remember, this will be a whole other conversation, but I remember there was a drive and a fierce competition. When we would do Jam Comics, she would be sitting there we were doing rap battles. Jamming with her, and she's just what do you got, Trops?
God.
And
I don't think I realized that she had that in her.
Yeah.
Because she's not like that if you're just in conversation.
No, not at all. But the work was get your game face on, because I'm going to kick your ass.
That's interesting that's the context that you saw that come out of her, because a lot of the stuff that she released around then were from the 5-minute comics.
Yeah.
So there used to be this event that we did, that a lot of the cartoonists in the Bay Area did, where we would get together and so somebody would write a bunch of prompts. Usually it was Jesse Reclaw, and he would put them in a hat, and everybody, they would pick out a prompt.
You're bringing me back.
And then he would start a little timer, and you would have 5 minutes to draw a comic based on that prompt. And the best ones were always Joey's.
Hands down.
And she wound up publishing a bunch of them. She did a book called Passing Periods that was all like 5-minute comics. And like, this is, I'm terrible at writing for the comic strip format. Like 4 panels and a punchline.
I don't agree that you're terrible at it. I think you're amazing at it. Nobody is Joey.
But it takes, Joey's game was untouchable when it came to that shit. And she wound up, it was publishable. And like, that was the stuff that I think got her other work. I feel like that must have been what led to Mad, Yeah.
But to get back to your own work, so...
Anyway, so I saw all these people putting out really good work, people that I had known for a long time, that were kind of leveling up. I hate that phrase, but...
I know you hate that phrase. I hate it too. I have used a lot of phraseology that I find despicable now. Because, right now, that is my MO. I am leveling up for what comes next. Because there's no pride in having street cred at 50.
Yeah, fuck. Being stuck in your service job, there's no integrity in that either. I was training my replacement at the job that I'm quitting yesterday. And he was like, "Oh yeah, so what kind of art do you make?" Because I let fly that this isn't the only thing I do. I don't just bring rich people pizza. I also bring them pasta. And he asked me what kind of art I make, and I was like, "Yeah, I make comics." And he was like, "Oh, do you do stuff where you draw on the computer?" And I was like, "No, I draw everything by hand." And he was like, "Oh, well, that's really that makes it even more impressive." And I was like, "Yeah, I wouldn't say it makes it more impressive. I would say it makes it slower and maybe dumber."
No.
But this is not going to hear me there, but I do think aspects of the process
the
can be
listeners
streamlined.
cannot see the defensive look on my face and the tears welling up in the corners of my eyes.
I know, but we both do this.
Traditional media is not. Yeah. No,
it's not dead. I would still draw. I want my work to be produced on paper, but
right.
And I would still make work.
Well, I just mean
that.
the means of creating it. And I've only very recently, because I see these incredible artists on Instagram, I've only very recently come around to fucking iPad's a tool, and it's in the right hands, and it's amazing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's not what I'm going to do. Because I for better or worse, and I do work digitally when it calls for that.
And you can. It's a skill set you have. I have lost work.
Analog. They're just analog for me. I'm not going to say that's a hill that I'm going to die on, but that's my aesthetic. I like the paper. I like the mistakes. My aesthetic was born out of being a chain smoker and having a shaky hand, and just being hey, what I'll do is just never use a ruler. That way, nothing is ever straight in my comics. So you won't even see how I'm jonesing for a cigarette. I haven't had one in 10 minutes.
If you don't rule the panel borders, that people can't compare those to the
exactly
the shaky lines in the panels.
It's the ecosystem. It's a shaky ecosystem. But seeing people work digitally, and they work beautifully digitally.
Yeah.
But not even really going anywhere there. Just it's funny that you're training somebody, and they're like, "Wow, that's really nice that you chisel your comics in the stone."
So what I do is I use this very specific type of acid and just let it drip.
And it dictates where the story is going to go.
Yeah.
Because, acid's going to do what it's going to do.
I'm okay with sort of introducing that random element to it and having it work with that. Everybody was making this good work, and I saw that, and I was like, I'm not going to prioritize being in a band. And I really put my nose to the grindstone, and I'd had a project that I had been working on for about a year. And started fresh with that project. Started from the beginning and had something ready for the next Alternative Press Expo. And these were,
was this also Track Rabbit, or was this a side project?
No, this was Track Rabbit. This was Track Rabbit 2. This is how that story about being at home and hanging out with my friends from high school. That.
Oh yes.
I'm not even going to pretend the story is an autobiographical,
yes,
at least heavily influenced by events and aspects of my life.
This is the one where you take the nod to The Queen is Dead, correct?
Yes. Yeah. What's the Salford Lads Club pose on the cover? which is just a photo of the Smiths, a band that was once fashionable amongst progressive types, but is no longer.
Thanks to Morrissey.
Thanks, Morrissey. So, and then a year later I had that out, and but I also saw that like I was putting myself under a lot of stress to get this stuff done. I was making this work for a limited audience and a limited forum. I was making work specifically to be published as photocopies, basically. Photocopied interiors with a silkscreen cover, sold almost exclusively to shops that carried zines, as they were once called, and as they are now, I believe, called again, now that 90s subculture has become fashionable. And I would really stress myself out to make these things. I would pull all-nighters. My roommate had a prescription for Adderall, and he would get excited about days where he could skip taking it, and I would take his Adderall. He would give me Adderall, and I would be like, hey, can I hit you up for an Adderall? And he'd be like, yeah, great, I love not taking my Adderall. I'm just not going to take one today. I'll give it to you, and I'll just get to be a freak all day. And then I would take his Adderall, and I was drinking. This might have been before I started doing this, but there was definitely a point during this kind of 3 or 4 year period where I would drink Sparks, and I was still smoking. So I was on prescription speed, caffeinated malt liquor, and like a pack of Parliaments a day.
And you did not have a heart attack.
And I miraculously didn't have a heart attack. And
I'm shocked that I didn't have a heart attack from the first time I drank Sparks.
People had heart attacks from Sparks.
I know. So you were doing the second track rabbit.
So I was doing the second track rabbit.
Very taxing and very time consuming.
Yeah. And I wound up, I got nominated for an award for that book. Not a super prestigious award. It wasn't like the Golden Globes of comics or whatever, but I was nominated for an Ignatz Award for Best Mini Comic that year.
See, I'd kill to get an Ignatz.
I would kill to get the fucking Ignatz Award for Best Mini Comic still.
Yeah.
And I'm 1,000 years old. So, I got nominated for an Ignatz Award, and then I was like doubly fired up to make my next book, and I made the next one in like record time. I've never put out a book as quickly as I did, from like conception to execution. I made the next book in like 7 months. Okay. And I'm still working a day job. I think this was when I was working at a fucking like crab place at Fisherman's Wharf. It was like professionally, it was the worst year of my life as a service industry denizen, because Fisherman's Wharf is a hellhole. The place where I was working was just a toxic, miserable little death trap. Just a tiny claustrophobic environment full of awful people. The clientele was awful.
I'm assuming this is just chock full of tourists. Like, you're not even getting the shitty locals. You're getting people.
It's
like
both.
Trash.
You're getting tourists, and then you're getting shitty locals who's like, because this has been a neighborhood institution, or rather a city institution. Like, all these places have been there on Fisherman's Wharf for, like a century, or whatever. So there's a handful of guys that think that they are these like. That think of them as neighborhoody institutions. And maybe for them they are. I don't know, whatever. I don't want to fault you if this place that has been a constant in your life for decades, like, for not being able to see past that and go enjoy more like Michelin star rated haute cuisine in the more fashionable parts of the city. But the fact remains that the guys that were local that went there were like even bigger dicks. Yeah. And the money was pretty good, but you made all your money on volume, so it would mean that like you could sell, you could bring home $200, but that would mean that you sold like $5,000 worth of crab and frozen shrimp that day.
Insane.
Yeah, crazy.
That's insane.
And the whole operation was about getting as many people in there as possible. So they had like a guy in front of the restaurant that would scream at people, like a carnival barker trying to get people to come into the restaurant to like buy the food, which the crab was admittedly fresh. Like, I guess the crab was pretty good if you're into eating fucking bugs. It was good. But like a lot of their shit was
I miss my bug eating days. Like, since I quit smoking, I can't eat seafood anymore.
Yeah, fuck a bug. You're not missing anything.
Yeah.
Bugs.
Sure.
They're not the pigs of the sea.
That's true. I mean, shrimp's fine. Crab's fine. Fish I miss.
I do
miss sushi.
I like eating fish. I like sushi a lot. I'm Sicilian, so I like swordfish and shit like that.
I walrused it up for a long time. So don't shed a tear from me.
No. You're good. You had a good run.
A good fishy run.
So I was working at this place and really, really burning the midnight oil to make comics.
And this is on your 7-month turnaround for issue 3.
Yeah.
And what was the theme of issue 3?
So issue 3 carried over some of the themes from issue 2, where there was like a lot of philandering and like shit talking between friends, and everybody was an asshole.
So not at all autobiographical.
It was less autobiographical than the first one. Informed more by what was going on around me in San Francisco. My roommate at the time, who was not like, we weren't good buddies or whatever, but this one story I thought was really funny.
And just to refresh my own memory, this is a story that has the girl, like with the crazy eyes.
Yeah.
Who my favorite line from that is, and I'm gonna totally misquote it, is dating that girl is like having a job.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That has come back to me, not in dating, but like being friends with this person is like having a job. So I quit.
Well, there are some aspects of the value system that I had at the time that I do not have a hold now.
Certainly not. Yeah.
If being friends with somebody is like having a job, that's on them. If dating somebody is like having a job, I don't know. I don't want to say it's that cut and dry, but like you should put some work into your relationships.
Sure.
I was not working crazy hours at the crab place. I could actually, because it was busy, I could make a living there working 3 days a week.
Okay.
Which was pretty good.
That's pretty swell.
Yeah. Yeah, it was all right. And I've been lucky. I've always lived in rent-controlled places.
Yeah. Knock on that motherfucking wood.
Yeah, right. So my overhead has not been super high, but yeah. So I guess that's probably how I got that book done so quickly. But I was still doing the same thing, and then like especially as it came down to crunch time, like so much Adderall, so much Sparks. I made a comic about this a couple months ago, sort of reminiscing about the heyday of my productivity and the potentially heart attack inducing shit that I was doing.
It comes at such an extreme cost, because like my most productive times have cost me like, hey, look, man, this is great. I got like 2 comics out in a couple of months. Like one of them.
That's insane. That's an insane level of
this is how you end up divorced.
Yeah.
And this is how you end up going. This is how you end up putting on like 20 pounds in a couple of months.
Yeah.
You're just like, all right, well, I gotta like sleep like 4 hours a night. So like, I don't have any time for exercise. I'm gonna drink a bunch of coffee. I'm gonna drink like a gallon of coffee a day. Mm-hmm. But to keep my hands from shaking more than they normally do, I'm also gonna drink 6 beers every night, like while I'm drawing.
It's because you've been drinking beer that you put on weight when you do these things. I lose weight because I don't have time to eat, and I only drink fucking whiskey and tequila.
So it's my bad for like drinking bread in a bottle.
Now
I just won't do it.
As I say this now, I'm like, I need another period like this. I can stand to lose. I know you can't see me out there in podcast land, everybody, but I can definitely stand to lose 25, 30 pounds. From doing too much Adderall and drawing stupid pictures of people giving each other blowjobs.
That's the thing that, like, yeah, it is really taxing. Yeah. Like, if you're trying, and it's insane because you're trying to make these deadlines to not make any money.
Exactly.
You're drawing to a show, which is another thing that I stopped doing way too late in the game. But I will not draw to a show. I'm just like, all right, well, I've got a back catalog. So if I make this... If I can complete this project in time, that's wonderful. I'm not going to like kill myself to lose $200 instead of like $1,000.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and for a while I had this thing where like I didn't want to do a show twice in a row without having something new for it.
Right.
So like I would do one circuit for a year. I do the Alternative Press Expo out here. I do SPX in Maryland. There was I would do Stumptown in Portland for a while. This is when Stumptown was still going on.
There was Mocha before it sucked ass.
Yeah.
For about 5 minutes.
Yeah. I used to do Mocha every year. Had some very formative experiences thanks to Mocha. And I would not want to do one of these shows 2 years in a row if I didn't have something new to bring the following year. So I set that bar for myself. Now I just don't do shows anymore. I can't. I honestly can't see doing a show again. And it costs money. It costs time. Like I guess if I had like a publishing company's, sort of push and resources behind it, and
the resources are the big thing.
Yeah. If I had a product to plug that I stood a good chance of making a profit off of, and I had a company that was doing the heavy lifting of the arrangements, I didn't have to like be a part of a table lottery or whatever. I would do it, but I'm not doing those shows anymore. I don't have the money to travel. It's as much fun as it is, like getting drunk and hanging out with you. Like we could do that here.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have a staycation one of these days where we just get a fucking
just hang out and get one.
Just me and you. We'll get a hotel in San Jose for the night. And go buy a 24-pack and some pretzels.
Beautiful San Jose.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, whatever. Just some place where we really don't know anybody and we're not embarrassed.
Put some comics on the table in the hotel room.
Yeah.
And then ignore the people who are still not coming by. Because we're in a room.
Yeah.
Versus at a table.
Yeah. But we're not going to get any less foot traffic up there than we do at our table in a busy convention floor.
We might do better.
It's possible. What are you two guys doing here?
What are you guys doing in your room?
I brought this
I like this.
I bought this pamphlet from a crazy Sicilian guy and his black friend. I don't know.
They were hanging out at Benihana.
And
I was like, when's the next time I'm going to see, like, this
This one had a little shrimp
lottery
residue on it, so the black guy gave it to me at a discount because he said he was allergic to it.
I just got a cramp. We now have our plan of attack for the convention season.
Oh, yeah. Oh, cannot wait.
All right.
So I made this book, this third book, the third issue of Track Rabbit. Got nominated for another award. By this point, I was in a long-distance relationship with another cartoonist.
Yes.
So I am now managing, making comics, traveling to go see my girlfriend, trying to keep up with this convention schedule, and this is around when my dad started to get really sick.
Oh, yes. Got it.
And everything just sort of hit a wall when he passed away. And I stopped making comics with any kind of frequency. The gap between books got longer and longer. It started to be years. I was out of money from traveling back and forth to New Jersey to go hang out with my sick parents.
And both of your parents, to be clear, had health problems, but your father's health problems came to a head much sooner than your mother.
Yeah. My father died when I was 30 from cancer that he had been struggling with for 6-ish years.
Yeah.
But my mother had multiple sclerosis, so I had to keep going back home to kind of see her through the process. And yeah, the productivity just really fell by the wayside at this point, and it was like, I don't know. I always feel like I'm making excuses for lack of artistic productivity if I say shit like this, but like having a service job and having to keep your game face on for 6 or 7 hours at a time while you bring rich people pasta and pizza. I don't know. I don't sound like I'm making excuses. Like anything I say is going to sound like a cop-out, but it's like, it's really hard to make work under those circumstances.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it, or am I just lacking character? I don't know.
No, because when you think about where both of us are at in this world that we've chosen for some reason, like when we've chosen to be cartoonists and we've chosen to continue to make work and we've chosen to like just continue down this road. So I try not to think about it too hard, but there's not an awful lot of reward apart from the work. There's not an awful lot of incentive apart from creating the work. There's incentive to work like a day job because you get to not be homeless. If you're lucky, there's plenty of people out there who work very hard and are homeless. Mm-hmm. But, you get to maintain a lifestyle. Like, you get to, sustain yourself. Like, you get to feed yourself, you get to house yourself, you get to clothe yourself, and, maybe you get to, have some fun at the end of it. Everything that you do creatively is at the detriment of those other things. It takes time away from those things. It takes money away from those things. It takes resources away from those things. As you get older, it takes energy away from those things because you have less energy as you get older. So, doing any day job, forget about how taxing it might be physically. Doing any day job and continuing to create is a massive undertaking. Doing a day job that is physically taxing and emotionally taxing because you have to care.
I'm filled with murderous rage all the time.
And that actually kind of brings me around, your work influences your work. Your work for a day job influences the work that you do creatively.
My comics are filled with murderous rage as well, yes.
Not only, but it works in quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And, can you talk about that a little bit?
Like you said earlier, I am faced with a lot of people who seem...
very self-important.
Yes, yeah. And that's the moral baseline I'm working with in my own work, it is very difficult for me to write characters with sort of morally upstanding motivations. I'm assuming I write from a perspective where everybody is in it for themselves, right. And I don't want to assume that anybody's doing anything for the right reasons, or that there even necessarily are right reasons. I'm writing about, self-involved people trying to find a way to negotiate the chaos without having to acknowledge their own flaws.
If I could point to something in which we cross over, it's that we both have slightly different flavors of nihilism that we explore. Mm-hmm. This Disney thing that we imagine everybody goes into life with, we tell ourselves we're all egalitarian, we're all on the same level, and we're all in it together, and that's a lie. And Geoff and I know that, and we write about it. Geoff, a lot more than I do. A lot more clearly than I do.
You don't address it. You address it more broadly.
Yeah.
For me, it's.
Mine is a lot more philosophical, and yours has actual object lessons in nihilism.
I think that's accurate. I think that you create a world. There's this caricaturish, grotesque George Gross character to the world that you create in your work, where the whole world reflects that view, whereas I try to hone in on sort of specific events that underscore that view,
yes.
More sort of it's a more intimate and less broad kind of crushing drama that plays out, but it's not. It's part of it is because it's what I know. It's influenced, and I know we have a lot of the same influences, but I think that there are certain cartoonists by whom we're both influenced, but you're influenced more by. Or rather, Pete Bagg comes to the fore more in your work than in mine. I think Jaime Hernandez probably... I take a lot from Jaime's work as well. The personal relationships that his work focuses on. And this is just one aspect of his work. He does, obviously, he's got a huge body of work that has tackled a lot of topics and been executed across different genres and sort of in different idioms. But it is about personal drama between people. And the beauty of his work is that, you've got these relationships between characters that have been established over decades.
Yeah.
And
there's these small things that happen that as like with life, are tremendous
and reverberate. Over time.
Like that's why I find the work so compelling. I can't tell you, and I know I'm maybe not alone in this, but like relatively like unique in this. I'm so bored by superheroes because I'm just like, yeah, you save the world again. That fucking happens all the time. I want to hear about somebody's hangnail. That's a real problem.
Like, you see me picking my nails right now? Is that why you said that?
No, I had one on my thumb recently. Okay. That's why I thought in mine. Like, that's a real problem. Like, that is like my real life. Like, you know, I shouldn't. I'm not complaining. I'm very happy with my life. But real life's very challenging.
It's true.
If you end my existence, then that's just done. Like, that's not a real problem.
Don't tease.
Oh, I'm not teasing. You too will die someday.
Oh. Promise?
Believe me, I cannot make a better guarantee.